Hello readers, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller, originally published in 1986. So to dive into an overview, in The Dark Knight Returns, the Batman is seeing an ever-eroding Gotham, and after a retirement, he returns to crime fighting. Visibly aged, he struggles to find the vigor he once possessed as he faces some of his most dangerous adversaries and new ones. He will test his own limits as well as the patience of the society he fights to protect. Now to go into the plot and the pacing. So this story is composed of 4 parts, each of which feeds into a larger story and a climactic final chapter. The pacing of the story itself is really fast. When I was reading it, I didn't feel like there was really any filler, and even when sequences aren't action-packed or fighting sequences, Miller's depicting something new, which holds the reader's interest. Primarily a character much grimmer than what we're used to as readers. Now to talk a little bit about the characters in the story. So the story does consist of many of the characters that we know and love from classic Batman, such as Alfred, Robin, Catwoman, Two-Face, Joker, and Detective Gordon. We also see a roster of newer characters, including the Mutant Gang, young gang members who are terrorizing Gotham City. Now to talk about some of the prevalent themes within the story. Firstly, political commentary. It seemed pretty clear to me while reading that Miller is pretty anti-establishment. In a way, he also seems to be anti-superhero. Many of the faces of the establishment, from the president, Ronald Reagan at the time, to the mayor of Gotham, or even the police commissioner and cops in general, are mocked and shown to be clowns and fools. Batman, on the other hand, is on a one-man rampage fighting his holy war against crime. Secondly, I want to talk about morality. So tying into the previous point, we're made to question the idea of identifying good versus evil. In this story, several characters who are usually portrayed as good, albeit sometimes dark, are pushed beyond their typical depictions. In Miller's story, he presents Commissioner Gordon, Batman, and Superman all as flawed people. Perhaps they've been broken by the systems of the government, or perhaps they were just broken all along. While this grounding in realism may seem a bit of a change for a character like Batman, who is a billionaire playboy who moonlights as a crime fighter, it simultaneously adds a fresh quality to a character who's been portrayed so many times. Batman is almost always depicted as a moral pillar for justice with a clear code and refusal to kill. But in this story, we see Batman's psyche unwinding into madness. His obsession with this war on crime has morphed him into a shell of a man, and he's willing to sacrifice everything and everyone for a crusade which will never be won. While reading this, I also began to question Batman's morality and his own judgment. In The Dark Knight Returns, Batman eschews in a new Robin for his own benefit. In the past, Batman has begrudgingly taken on new Robins as an apprentice of sorts, but here he seems to view Robin as another tool on his utility belt to conjure when he needs assistance, regardless of the danger or trauma associated with the mantle. Now to talk about some of the good and the bad elements of the story. So firstly, the story is incredibly immersive. I thought the pacing is extremely seamless, especially for a story like this where it's told in multiple parts and seemingly each chapter is on a different villain or a different goal. However, in the end, it blends extremely cohesively and it doesn't feel like you're jumping from one place to another. Secondly, one of the key elements that they use to move the story along and characterize the city of Gotham itself are news commentators on television who describe events unfolding in the city, but it's the specific way in which they're describing events that they almost seem to relish in the gore and trauma of the atrocities that they're discussing. Ultimately, I feel like this is indicative of not only the human psyche, but speaking to Gotham itself as a character within this story and the larger universe of Batman. And it makes you think it's no wonder a man like Batman could be created in a place like this. The story also takes really classic and iconic characters that are so well known and takes them to their logical extremes in a way which feels like reinvention. So when you're reading this, it feels very fresh, very new. And even though this book is nearly 40 years old, it still feels as relevant as a reader today. For me, the only slight downside is the art style itself. Just personally, it's not my personal preference of art style, but while reading, you're definitely still able to get into the story, get into the events that are unfolding, and I didn't think in any way the art style hindered the story. Just again, stylistically, it's not my preference. So to go into my final thoughts, while reading, I honestly thought that this is the best Batman story I've ever read. I think it's generally a must-read, fantastic piece of fiction, and especially if you're an adult who maybe has never really gotten into graphic novels or understood the appeal of comics, this may be a perfect selection for you. It's gritty, it's realistic, it's dark, but it still has a lot of heart, and it's really a great examination of America culturally. Have you read The Dark Knight Returns? What did you think about it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. As always, happy to get any recommendations you may have, and thanks so much for watching.